Hello, my name is Ray Hughes, and I'm an interviewer with the Veterans History Project out of Washington, D.C., and conducted locally by the Cincinnati Hamilton County Public Library. Today is the 18th of February, 2017, and we have the honor and privilege today of interviewing World War II veteran Paul Potter. Is it all right if I just call you Paul?
Perfect, that suits me best.
Okay, good. Paul, if you would, tell us the date you were born and where you were living when you were born.
In Springfield, Ohio, 30 August 1925.
And what were your parents' names there, Paul?
My father's name was Edwin Forrest Potter, and my mother's name was Mabel Yenser Potter.
I see. And
Mabel Yenser, period.
That was her maiden name?
Yeah.
And what schools did you go there to there? Did you say Springfield?
Springfield, Ohio.
What schools did you go there to there in Springfield?
Well, sure, I went to any. I think I went to the first grade, actually, in Pleasant Ridge. But we moved from Springfield to Norwood. My father was in the shoe business, and we were there for a while. Then we moved to Pleasant Ridge, to Buena Vista. Then we moved just outside of Pleasant Ridge in a subdivision called Ridgewood. And then my father, who came from a small town in New Jersey and was an orphan and only went to the 4th grade, wanted to move back to the country. So we moved to Claremont County. And I went to a two-room school there, grades 5, 6, 7, and 8, and it was great.
What little burg was that, or village?
Well, it doesn't exist anymore. One of the interchanges of the bypass went right through it. And we had a farm there, and
In Claremont County?
yes, very close to Hamilton County. In high school, I went to Anderson, and then I volunteered and went in the Army in January, 4th or 5th, something like that, 1944. And then I came back and went to the University of Chicago for 6 years. And then I got a job.
You say that you mentioned your father was in the shoe business. Was that Potter Shoes in Cincinnati?
No, it was another one. They sold, they were a much bigger outfit. My father worked on orthopedic shoes.
I see.
Especially for women, I believe. He didn't sell men's shoes.
I see.
And he always emphasized to me the importance of shoes that fitted and looked good. So to this day, I keep my shoes as shined as possible.
Yes.
And put shoe trees in them. I'm very conscious of that.
Did your mother work?
No, but my mother was exceptional. She had a college degree at 2 years in the Teachers College in 1912. And she came from a different, from eastern Pennsylvania, a little town that had a slate quarry, and her father was the manager of the slate quarry and the mayor. So the upper level of that little town.
What was the town's name, do you recall?
Called Slatington. And I don't know how she met my father, but it worked together. But my father was a very intelligent and a wonderful salesman. And you can see it this way. He and my mother got married when he had no job. That's unusual. And they went to New York, and then with the money he had, they took a boat to Florida without any connection whatsoever, and he got a job in the second day, you see.
Now, was he a salesman?
Well, that's what, he wasn't trained in a fourth grade education, even then, that's about all you can do. So that was an interesting combination, and they were both very sharp and helped me a great deal in life.
How did you spell your mother's maiden name?
Yanser.
Yanser.
Yes, a German name. They came from the Pennsylvania Dutch district of Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. And did you have any brothers and sisters?
I had a brother, and he's no longer with us.
Mm-hmm. And do you recall Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th?
Yes, very well, very much. It was a rainy day in Cincinnati, and I think my parents weren't home, and I was inside probably studying, but my brother was down at the barn doing something, and when I heard that, I ran down and told him.
And how old were you then?
Well, let me see, I was then about 15 or 16.
You were born in 1925, I think you said?
Yes.
And so you would have been 35 and sick, you've been 16, yes?
Possibly, yes.
Yeah.
First couple of years of the war, I was too young.
So you were going to what school at that time?
Well, I went to, because I lived in Anderson, the University of Cincinnati offered, were so short of students that they offered seniors to come to college. And I'd say you could do that today. And I think there are many programs like that. And my parents took me to school, both to Anderson and to UC. But then the two-room school was close enough that I could walk home at least. And so I did that for a year, and that's what gave me the credentials to be in fire control later on.
So you went to UC in downtown there on Clifton Avenue?
No, I went, well, on Clifton, yes, the main campus.
Right, and that was in lieu of your senior year?
Yes.
At high school?
Yes, but you got the high school diploma, of course.
Mm-hmm. And how long did you go to UC?
Just 2 semesters, spring semester and fall semester.
Of 1943?
I enlisted, and then I was drafted. No, wasn't drafted, but reported to Fort Thomas on, the first working day after New Year's or something like that.
Of 1944?
Yes.
Uh-huh. So you enlisted, actually.
Yes.
And you had a high school education, but also
a year of college.
A year of college.
Right.
And so you go to Fort Thomas in January of 44, I would say.
Right. Yes, the first working day. Maybe I went in the Army, wouldn't care about that. Be here, kid, on the first day.
So tell me what happened at Fort Thomas.
Well, a new uniform, and a lot of uneasy people, and it always seemed that when you first entered the service, the uniform didn't fit and all that sort of thing. And my parents came to see me a couple times, and then we took a train to Texas. And I found it exciting,
Where at in Texas?
El Paso. And I'd never been out west. We had traveled to Canada, we'd been to Gatlinburg, and I'd been to Pennsylvania, but I thought it was great. And we took the Katy. The Katy, probably many people haven't heard of it, was the informal name for the St. Louis and Southwestern Railroad, like that. And it runs through a lot of, not the richest country, especially then, had overtones of the Dust Bowl.
Mhm. What base was that?
It was, I don't know, but it had, it was called Fort Bliss, that's what it was called.
And that was strictly an Army base?
Yeah, yes, but many airplanes stopped there being ferried to the West Coast. And I don't think there was anything there than that, and it was an anti-aircraft training school.
Now, did you go through regular basic training there, like the physical part and marching and things like that?
Yes, we continued that at Camp Gruber, which was east in the Ozarks, east of Tulsa. But it wasn't too rigorous. Fired machine guns and fired the M1. And I think we didn't have M1s, we had a carbine. And we'd spend time out there and practice spotting and firing the Bofors weapon, which is worked very, very well.
What's a Beaufort?
It's a 40 millimeter semi-automatic thing with a big clip like an M1. You put that clip in it, and then you can press the pedal, and it'll fire as you press your foot down. And it has a rapid traverse, so it's might reach to 10 or 12,000 feet. I don't know what you could hit that high. And you normally wouldn't fire like that. And using it, if you don't think you're going to get a kill, you don't fire at all. You don't show your position.
And is that the training that you went through at Fort Bliss? And how long were you at Fort Bliss, would you say?
I don't know. I would say maybe 6 or 7 months.
Oh, really?
Yes, and the difference between basic training and working at the unit is blurred in my mind.
Were you assigned to a division at this time, or a regiment?
No. Fort Bliss was an old cavalry place, as you might suspect, to patrol the border, say 200 or 300 miles on either side, and it was made to show U.S. authority. The Gadsden Purchase was made to build a railroad, and when they bought that from Mexico, they had to have some sort of security on the border to establish the President of the United States.
Mm-hmm. So, after you left Fort Bliss, where did you go?
We went to Camp Gruber, which was a lot less interesting. At El Paso, you could go downtown or out in the valley and buy a steak. Remember, we used to have a nice steak for about $2.75, and Camp Gruber had nothing to do. And
where was Camp Gruber at?
It's about 70 miles east of El Paso, east of Tulsa. And
Tulsa, Oklahoma.
yes, and but we could take a bus in there on the weekend, and I used to do that. And there was plenty of room in the Ozark foothills to fire a heavy artillery piece and to march and that sort of thing.
Were you assigned to a unit at this time?
Well, we had it, yes. We had it. That's the unit I stayed with.
What was that unit?
I can't remember that.
What division was it? Do you recall?
Well, we weren't attached to a division. We were attached to like an army group. These were 5-inch howitzers, which would fire at about 12 miles at the maximum. And they were put where they're needed. you see, whereas 105 was attached to an infantry group or by itself.
And what millimeter were you firing? The howitzer?
155 millimeters.
155 millimeter.
That's 5 inches.
And that range is 12 miles, you say?
Yes, but no one likes to do that. Do you know why?
No.
Wears out the barrel right away. And so if a barrel gets worn, it won't shoot straight. So you might have a situation where the battalion commander calls up, hey, he said, I don't like to fire at maximum range. 2 more days of this and we won't be able to hit a barn. There's so much pressure there, you see, that it takes the grooving out.
And so you don't recall the name of the unit you were with, though?
I don't remember that.
But your job was what while you were?
Well, I was an ammunition handler, and then because I'd gone to college for a year with a number of math courses, I worked for artillery spotter. And that group, it was very interesting. It consisted of a first lieutenant, a buck sergeant, private first class spotter, and a private in a jeep. And it was very nice in peacetime because no one was shooting at you. But if we had invaded Japan, it's a place where you want to keep your head down.
Now, is that somewhat similar to a forward observer?
Yes, that's the same thing.
A spotter?
Yes.
And so at Gruber, how long were you there, would you say?
Well, I don't know. I would say we might have been there 6 or 7 months. And I can't remember what time it was, what time of year it was, when we went to the Philippines.
So when you left Gruber, you did go to the Philippines?
Yes. Took 23 days.
And do you recall when that was?
I don't know. I know the events, but I don't have the numbers anymore.
Okay. So how did you get to the Philippines?
Well, we took an old passenger ship.
From what city?
San Francisco. We took a steamboat from where we were. We took a train to using San Francisco. There was a staging camp upriver about maybe 70 or 80 miles. They used steamboats to take the troops to a dock. And everyone was kind of excited at that. And we got there late in the midday, and then we left. And this might have been a 25,000-ton ship. I believe it used to go on along to the Matson line and go from New York to South America. And we were on that, and we went by ourselves to Hawaii, and then we had a destroyer escort. That's not a destroyer, but a destroyer escort, a little less, that went with us all the time, the rest of the time.
From San Francisco?
No, from Hawaii. We didn't stop at Hawaii, but it joined us there, and we went way south to Ulysses and someplace else.
Did you go to Lake Allen, you said?
No, way south.
Oh, way south. Ulysses?
Ulysses and another one. It was interesting in Ulysses. Ships almost to the horizon, anchored apart. And we got off in the Philippines in the mid-morning and found our barracks bag and milled around a little bit, and then we went down. We took a train flat car up to the end of the railroad. And I don't remember that town. And then when we went out and camped in a rice paddy, and it promptly rained, but there was a stream there, and we built a camp, and we were occupied with that, and we were right at the foothills that sort of looked like a Smoky Mountain. And these poor Japanese who were no longer fighting for us, but a lot of them lived in the mountains. And you could get a skin infection there. Even Japanese would. They had no food and they had diarrhea. They'd come in, they looked in terrible shape, and they were. And the locals didn't like them. And if they saw one, they'd cut their head off. And we had one guy, a number of times I'd stand guard at night over this trail that came up out of the mountains, down from the mountain, and kind of lonely. And but if the locals, and then they would bring them in happy as a lark and smiling, carrying this head with long hair, you know. I don't know what happened to those people if they got with Americans. You wouldn't like it. Of course, you wouldn't do what the natives did, but they were oppressive to the natives. But the medical bill to get them healthy would have been enormous, you see. You know, those skin diseases don't just go away with a couple of pills. And so that's a blank spot.
When you landed in the Philippines,
It's all quiet.
you were still on that Maxim ship line?
Well, yes,
Yeah.
yes, we went all the way on that.
And do you recall when you did land in the Philippines? Was it
I'm afraid,
1945?
I'm afraid you have a sequence of events with no
Date.
data points.
Yeah. Well, it was after the invasion in October of '44.
Yes, yes, and then when the war was over, I took some little trips. Went up to the pass just north of us. There had been a terrible pass, a terrible battle between the drainage that flowed south to Manila and the drainage that went north to the ocean. And I went up to see that, and it was recent enough that you could smell all these dead bodies, which have a very sweet smell to them, not a smelly smell. And we walked a little bit off the road, but it was very dangerous to do that. And we got up there, and there were all these army trucks around, and they'd give you a ride. Well, after some time, our group was decommissioned, and we packed up the guns and all that sort of thing. And I was sent to Manila, and I had the worst job in the world, guarding Japanese prisoners. Well, what's so tough about that? Well, it's the hour. 4 hours on and 4 hours off forever.
Can't get anything done.
Nothing. No, you can't go to town. It takes a while to get your system accustomed to.
Yeah.
You could easily spend 6 hours there or 8 hours with a little break. And so
How many Japanese prisoners would you say were there?
well, I never knew that as a private first class, but there might be, I'd see a couple hundred, maybe. And sometimes they'd come up and talk. I didn't encourage that. And, but there was an Armed Forces Institute which taught courses to the Air Force, to the Navy, and so forth. And somehow I got off. I went down there and told them my background, and if I could, there were an opening to grade math papers. And they said yes. So I escaped 4 hours off, 104 hours off. And so I did show some personal initiative in both cases of getting the job I liked in the Army.
Now, they were giving courses to our military personnel?
Yes. And it was what I would say a very soft touch in Manila in an office building.
Now, you know, you were trained to fire a 155 millimeter
Yeah.
howitzer.
Yeah.
Now, did you have to study mathematics for the trajectory
No,
and the range?
What we did was, the officer in charge had the authority to select the point, but we gave him the information and we calculated where it was with a slide rule. And they still use that in the artillery. It sounds terrible, but if your computer falls in the creek, it's not going to work. And are you going to be absolutely impotent, you see? So that's a fallback thing that you can always use. And
now, had you had training for the studying the trajectory and the range?
What I had, I knew how to use a slide rule and understood how we were calculating the distance, you see. And we were never actually, we practiced it in a very safe place. But I think what would have happened is that the private and I, and maybe the buck sergeant, would actually be getting the data, and the lieutenant would have been back maybe 50 feet or something. We had to communicate with him to keep his head down, you see. We had a very nice lieutenant. He was a German Jewish refugee, very soft-spoken, and had an engineering degree in Germany. So you know he was smart.
What was his name, do you recall?
I can't tell you that. And of course, if you have a command of 3 people, that's so tough to manage.
Yeah.
So it was a very nice, cohesive group.
Do you remember the names of anybody in your little group?
Nothing.
But, was it, when you got into the Philippines, was the war over yet?
In the Philippines, it was.
Was the World War II over yet?
No, it was going very strong in Okinawa.
So you're on the island of Luzon. So actually then, if you say Okinawa was going on, Okinawa started on April the 1st of 45.
Yes, I got out in 46.
Yeah. So you're there during April of 45 in the Philippines.
Well, longer than that.
Right.
Maybe 6 to 7 months.
Were there still Japanese fighting against our men there in the Philippines where you were there?
I don't think so. But there were still Japanese coming out of the hills, and there were certain areas where we just didn't bother to go after them, you see. We just let them starve to death.
Right.
And so once I wanted to go up to Baguio, the summer capital of the Philippines. Right near there is the highest point of the Philippines.
Baguio?
Yes. Yeah. And I went and asked the major there in intelligence. He said, I wouldn't do that if I were you. He said, that's not really a secure area. So naturally we didn't. But we did play golf in Baguio. What a course. It goes right down a narrow ridge, twisting narrow ridge, and I'm not a golfer, but I can tell you, anything.
You lost a lot of balls?
Those ridge scarps must be loaded with golf balls. No, this ridge is going like this, and
Right.
for all these elite Filipino or Americans who were in Baguio to get away from the heat, that was one of the outside sports.
Now, is that north of
Yeah.
Manila?
Yes, it's north of the invasion point.
Okay. What about our American prisoners of war over there in the Philippines? At Cararatan, or I think it was,
Well,
did you see any of our American POWs?
No, but later on, I was at Hopkins for a year, and I stayed with the widow who lived in a nice part of town in Towson, who she and her husband were Japanese prisoners of war.
What do you mean by Hopkins?
Johns Hopkins University, and in Baltimore. And he had died. He suffered quite a bit from some health problem, and he died. And I was only going to be there for a year, and the professor I was going to work with knew her, and she lived in quite a nice house out in Towson, and he said, and she had a separate isolated bedroom somehow. So I lived in that, and she felt more comfortable there when I was only at home at night, you see.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd come home and say hello to her, or say, hello, Mrs. So-and-so, hope you're okay, and go to bed. And she told me quite a bit about that, of being a prisoner of war there.
Can you share some of that with us?
I don't remember that, but they weren't mistreated or anything, but they didn't have much food. You know, it wasn't too long that these Japanese garrisons around the Philippines, at first they were welcome, but in a short while, you know, early in the war, they were very cruel to the natives. That happened in Indonesia, it happened in Singapore. And instead of being neutral, one Asian throwing out white people and another native Asian people, it was a natural alliance. You were in an area like the American Army in Iraq, a lot of people didn't like you. That's a dangerous area. And the Japanese, they were in a backwater of the army there. And so they didn't have the best equipment, and there weren't enough of them to garrison. There's so much empty space in the mountains that pretty soon you were like an American outpost in 1805 west of the Appalachians, place you've got to be careful in. And so I don't know that, but they worked there before the war, and then the war came along and we couldn't get out. And I didn't ask her a lot about that, so I don't know, but it was a great place for me to live, and it helped her enormously because she wasn't alone in a big house.
Mm-hmm. So we're back into the Philippines now, and how long did you stay in the Philippines? When did you leave the Philippines?
When was I discharged? I think I was discharged, it must have been in the spring of 1946. I went back.
Were you still in the Philippines when Japan surrendered?
Yes. And if they hadn't surrendered, I'd been in the front line. I would say Japan would have been another Okinawa on a bigger scale.
Yeah.
I would say we went back maybe, I don't know when they surrendered, but it might have been in...
Well, they surrendered August the 15th of 1945.
So I stayed in the Philippines about another 7 or 8 months.
Okay. How did you hear about the surrender?
Well, everyone knew that. I mean, you know, we weren't isolated from the news, and we didn't read papers, but I don't know how that was communicated.
Did you have radios?
Yes, but not us. Yes, there were a lot of radios around, but they were only used for, unless you had one and knew how to work it, and there might not be many radio stations working then. There would have been one put up very early to give news to the troops, but whether it would reach 100 miles from Manila is another question.
Did you have much liberty in going into the towns or villages while you were in the Philippines?
There was nothing to go into.
Was Manila all but destroyed?
No, it was not. I don't want to say about it. I'm not sure many soldiers would know that. It was a working city, and it wasn't fought over by the Americans, and I don't think the Philippines fought much because it was clear that the American army wasn't able to defend the city of Manila in the beginning of the war.
Right.
And they weren't planned to. They were going to go to Bataan and wait for a winning naval battle to do that.
While you were there, did you visit Corregidor Island?
Yes. It was interesting to me, and it was torn up quite a bit, you know, from the Japanese bombed it and so forth. And
is that a big island?
no, I would say, I just have to guess at this. I would say it might be 4 miles long and half a mile to a mile wide.
Was there a village on that island or not?
No, all a military base. And then there was another base on the other side of the bay.
Where at?
I don't know, on the mainland of Luzon.
Oh, what about, we hear so much about tunnels over at Bataan.
Yeah, well, yes, they had those.
Did you visit those or not?
I might have. I was more interested in the surface. I didn't go there to see the items. I went to see what the pre-war Corregidor defenses were and how they were destroyed by the Japanese.
And what about over on Bataan? Did you visit there?
I did not visit that. So I didn't go, and I'm sure when I was there, there were no markers and things like that put up.
You hear so much about the Japanese building tunnels and things like that. Did you ever see any of those?
No. When we went up to look at that battle, you might have, but it would be very, very dangerous to walk around on an old battlefield like that. You know, there's a grass and weeds, and there may be a few hand grenades lying around, or there could be some booby traps there. It'd be a foolish thing to do.
What about poison animals, snakes and things of that nature while you were there?
They take a long vacation during the war, except for scorpions and things like that. And if you were camped out in the rainforest, you'd see them. But, you know, the natives don't pay too much attention. It's visitors who aren't alert to them.
Did you live in a regular barracks while you were in the Philippines?
No, we lived in tents, but in Manila I lived in a hotel. It wasn't, the toilets worked and that sort of thing, and the showers worked, and I think it was one of the luxury hotels at one time, but it wasn't luxury when we were there.
What about food?
Well, where did we eat? We ate, I can't remember, on the rice paddy we ate our own, and it wasn't bad. And in Manila, I think we ate our own, but you could also buy food in town.
Now, when you're living out in your tent, how long did you live in your tent, would you say?
Well, all the time we were there, and there was no place else to live. And
is that outside of town, or?
I don't recall the concept of town didn't exist.
I see.
And it wasn't too bad. No, we did, I don't know what we did all day. We didn't lie around, I'll tell you that. And there weren't any, there were some roads, but I think we never went on marches or things like that. The field artillery is kind of settled.
Did you have your weapons with you, your artillery, howitzers?
Yes, they didn't go to overseas with them, but we met them and they were waiting for us in Manila.
How did you transport those, with a Jeep or what?
No, they're much too heavy. We used a tractor, an army tractor, and they were towed. Nowadays, the tractor is big enough. The gun is mounted on the tractor. So we towed ours with something like a tank with its top cut off.
Mm-hmm.
And it had a machine gun on it, and in fire control we didn't do that. We had the Jeep, period.
So your job would have been, if you had to invade Japan, you would have been in the forefront of.
Yes. The infantry would have been ahead of us, but not by much, you see. You know, that had been so difficult because we wouldn't have invaded a mountainous area, but a lot of Japan is like that. And you're always looking up the hill, like fighting across Italy, you know. The Germans are always at the top of the hill.
Explain why, if you would, the difference between pressure on a barrel if you're firing 2 miles versus 10 miles. How does that? Is it the power?
Yes. You know, you put the shell in, and then you put in bags of powder, and if you put in one bag, it'll throw it a little bit. And it's rather low pressure. And you know, you can watch the shell go from a gun. Okay. If you're right behind it, you can just see it traveling up there. Well, if you put in 4 bags, it'll go a lot further, and it burns hotter, and there's more acceleration, and it starts to spiral, you see. Mm-hmm. So it spirals real fast, and it gets hotter, right, not only from the explosion, but there's more torque, more twist per second, or microsecond. Mm-hmm. And so it'll just wear out the barrel. It's sort of like with an automatic transmission, well, you probably couldn't do it, huh? Well, maybe so, but with let the clutch out in a hurry, mm-hmm. repeatedly, and pretty soon you're going to have a big clutch bill on your hand.
Plate.
Or the other thing it does, it see how fast you can go up a steep hill from nothing. And so you can fire a few of those. In an emergency you would. But instead of having the barrel won't be true anymore, you see? And it may start with, when it's really worn, it starts with an incremental wobble built into it. And that'll maybe get worse along the way.
Now, the 155 howitzer that you were carrying and trained to use to fire.
No, I wasn't, but we.
Was that used for air?
No, that was used
against
course,
enemies?
that would be used at the direction of the corps commander, where it was needed, you see.
Against an enemy position on the
Yeah,
ground.
some people really dug in, you see, to soften them up so the infantry won't get slaughtered in the attack. And sometimes if an early invasion force, I don't know how that would exactly work, but if they were giving very close support, that might be directed by a captain up front, you see, if we weren't there. An example of that is I know someone who invaded, a Marine who invaded Iwo Jima, and he said, Paul, the most exciting thing I've ever done in my life was direct fire a 14-inch battleship offshore. And he was dug in the trenches right down by the sea. And he said, I talked to the captain of the ship, he and I were talking on the radio, and I corrected the fire, and he said, you could hear it coming. And I'm sure that would have happened, and maybe we would have been right with him, but in this case, in Iwo Jima, you don't want too many intermediaries there.
I lost my train of thought about the barrel. How many inch barrel, when you say inch, that's in diameter?
Yes.
And how many inch barrel did you have on that 155 howitzer?
5 inches.
5 inch barrel?
5 inches is 155 millimeters.
Okay.
And that's a standard size for many naval guns. That's a 5-inch gun. And I think they still use that. I'm not sure about that.
Has it affected your hearing as you age?
No, well, I would say my loss of hearing I attribute to old age and nothing else. And I just heard it a few times, you see. But once we in Oklahoma, I don't know what we were doing. We were right by the guns. I was watching the shells go up. And that was on a firing range.
So you're discharged and you come home. How did you get home from the Philippines?
Well, by a boat, of course. And it was a very emotional moment for me when we came to the Farallon Islands. There a fault island offshore just above sea level, It was evening, and I actually cried then. I didn't have any reason to cry, but the idea of coming back. And I had seen them when we left, and there they were again.
The what island?
Farallon Islands, Farrolyn. I think Francis Drake recognized them very early when he was there. I believe he he went up the coast, the Englishman, but they were seen earlier by the Spanish. And we were in San Francisco for 2 or 3 days, and when we left, we didn't get to go downtown, of course. We went right to the ocean-going ship, but when we came back, I went up on top of the Mark and so forth, and then we took a train, and I got off at Indianapolis, and I didn't tell my parents I was coming home. I thought I'd surprise them, but they must have suspected because they didn't get any letters from me. And
Had you been discharged yet?
I got discharged, no, in Indianapolis.
At Atterbury? Camp
I
Atterbury?
don't think I know, downtown someplace.
Oh, okay.
Camp Atterbury must have existed, but that's an awkward place to get discharged because there's no, normally not much public transportation around Camp Atterbury. And
What was the date of your discharge, do you recall?
I don't know that.
1946?
Yes, that would be in my discharge papers. And
So how did you get home from Indianapolis?
well, I did something, I splurged. I took American Airlines DC-3. I flew home
From Indianapolis?
to Cincinnati, yes. And then I went out to the farm, and I came at supper time.
Now, when you landed in Cincinnati, did you land in Kentucky or did you land at Lunkin?
I don't remember. I'd say we landed in Lunkin because we used DC-3s. Yes, of course.
Now, DC-3 is a civilian version of the C-47.
No, it's the yes, that's right. That's
Yeah.
correct. And you know, some of those are still used today.
Yes.
And
So you got home at supper time.
well, I got home in mid-afternoon, and I don't know how I got out to the farm. I may have taken a taxi, and I was in army clothes, of course, and I don't know how much money. I think I was given $100 in my pay, and well, everyone was surprised, upset, suffer in a very significant. And my brother was there, and he and I talked, and it wasn't long, so it was sort of beginning of the summer, and we didn't farm anymore because during the war we couldn't get any help, and we always had a farmer, and but we had some cattle. I don't know who looked after them. They were not milk cows, they were beef cattle, and then I wanted to continue school, and I took the exam for the University of Chicago and got in, and that fall I went to the University of Chicago, and it was exciting to me. And
What were you studying? What were you going to major in?
well, I didn't really know, but I took a course in geology, and you're looking at one today. And
Did you do 4 years there at the university?
I spent 6, and I got a PhD in geology, and it was and I had the GI Bill for most of that time, and I used to take the James Whitcomb Riley to Chicago.
From Cincinnati?
Yes, and it was a gentleman's way to travel. If that train existed today, of course it couldn't exist economically because you can drive there in 5 hours if you're
Burning the highway up.
burning the highway up, or more like 7 to me.
Yeah.
And but it left at 8:30 in the morning and got to Chicago about 1:30 or 2.
Well, how often did you come home?
Well, I'd come home every quarter, and
okay.
But the great thing about it was it had a homemade observation car on the back. And it had 2 seats there. You could tell it was homemade, it had a window looking out the back, and they cut off a car, and they weren't the most skilled heavy metal workers, and it had a speedometer in it. And it was the greatest fun to sit there and look back, and it had steam engines, of course. It had just one to go from Cincinnati to Indianapolis. And it's a pretty steep ride going up Turner's Creek at Lawrenceburg. And we hit about 65 going to Indianapolis. But they put 2 engines on to go to Kankakee. And up in Flat, Indiana, it hit 85. And a car would be whipping back and forth, it's the last car. The dust would be flying. It was exhilarating to a person who was 23 or 22 years old.
So you graduate or finish your courses at the University of Chicago in 1952?
Yes.
And you have earned a PhD?
Yes.
So what happens?
Well, I got a job at Urbana, Illinois, with the Illinois Geologic Survey, and I spent 9 years there, and it was terrific. It's what I would call an incredible postdoc. That's the word that's used these days for people who stay in school after a PhD. Well, I met all kinds of people. I did a wide variety of things. I did what they told me, and then I did more research, which they allowed. And I was able to take 1 course a semester, the standard, but I worked many more hours, and it gave me a magnificent postdoc, where I got paid.
Or these how do they refer to geographic maps of the whole United States?
Geologic map.
Geologic maps of the whole United
We
States.
worked on some of those, but more importantly, Illinois doesn't have. It's not too easy because most of the geology is buried by glacial material. You map coal beds, you map different rocks to make their structure, and you look at their properties. And that was wonderful for me. And I went to meetings, and I really established myself as a geologist there. And I'd never been married. So that was my love, and I really worked on it. So I got to go to meetings, wrote papers, published things, and I think I also served the survey well. And then I went to Johns Hopkins for a year, and helped the professor with some books. And then I was at Indiana University for 7 years and learned about teaching and did some more books. All the books I published are co-authored. And then I got an offer from Cincinnati, and I came here in 1971, and I worked here very successfully with the department.
At the University of Cincinnati?
Yes, in geology. And I was getting up in years by this time. And I had traveled abroad, and I always wanted to live abroad and work. That's not so easy to do. Live abroad and live on the beach, really easy to do. But that fitted the people in Brazil very well, so I went to In 1993, I moved to Brazil for 7 years.
What city?
Well, I was in a little town, Rio Claro, about 100 miles from Sao Paulo, and there wasn't too much there for me to do. Nice people in the town of 100,000, and I had an apartment. And because I was working there, I had a checking account. And so I didn't get much money, but I was.
Who were you working for?
A university, and I had a checking account, and it was very interesting that Brazil was having 2,000% inflation at that time. I'd never lived through that. And when I first went there in 1974, there was a dictatorship there, and they had censorship. These friendly people isolated from the world. And then I got a job offer in southern Brazil in 5 years, and I suddenly became a valuable resource because the National Science Foundation of Brazil decided we want all our papers to be published in English. We want the prestige of our research to be fully appreciated. And to have an in-house professor who likes to do that and has a track record of helping people write papers was a godsend. And suddenly I was a gem, you see.
And you paid in English, in American dollars?
No, I was paid in reais, as it's called. And I maybe lost money, but what I gained in life and what I gained in experience was worth thousands of dollars, you see.
And you became fluent in Portuguese?
Modestly so. I generally wrote on the board in Portuguese, in English, and talked it out as best I could in Portuguese. And it's a very nice language. And
beautiful language.
Then when I came, then I was starting to write a book with with one of our professors. I saw that I couldn't do it. I came back. I was offered to stay, and if I had probably met the right girl, I might have done that. And
I'm surprised you didn't.
well, it's I wouldn't say what I'd say. It's pretty hard not to.
Yeah.
And you've been to Brazil, I believe.
I worked for Senor Leon from Sao Paulo.
Yes.
He owns Cinco.
What's that?
Five Cinco.
What do they do?
They sold automobiles. He's the largest Fiat dealer in the world.
Oh yeah.
And you see pictures of the Brazilian women, and they come in all shades.
Yes,
and,
that's right.
And very
But
attractive.
the real featured, all women are also beautiful, no. But they're very feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what attracted. I'd like to quit.
Okay. So you came.
Yeah, I came back, and I still go to UC, and I'm still working on papers, and I calculated the other day I've had a professional life of 64 years, but I haven't been paid all that time. And but I think in another year or so I'm going to stop. And I'm 91 now, and maybe I should do that. And I'd just like to say this. I'm so indebted to my experience in the Army because it taught me, taught me how to get along with all kinds of people and work together. And that's an incredible something to learn, don't you think?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And you don't learn that in many jobs. You know, you work with whatever that group is like, and if you have a job with them for life, that's all you really know in some ways. But in the Army, you have to work with people you've never known and that may not like instinctively. And see that they can be just as human and just as good or just as bitchy as you are.
Well, I guess we've come to the end of our interview then, and is there anything else you want to add, sir?
No, but I did want to say that. And I've always recommended for young men or young women who don't know quite what they want to do, I say, why don't you go in the armed services and you'll find a new self.
Right, absolutely.
And I don't think, I don't know what the recruiters do, and but they might emphasize that, but I guess it would be better to emphasize it to parents.
Yeah, yeah.
And tell parents that if you have a son that you're worried about, let them go in the armed services, and they'll be a new person.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
Been a pleasure, and I want to thank you for the interview,
Yeah.
and thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you.
Thank
Same
you.
to you.
Thank you, sir.